Good evening, friend. I see you've wandered into another tavern, and I can't help but wonder, what do you hope to hear from the bards this evening?
Moriden, Athluan.
Tonight, dear listeners, I tell you the tale of Moriden Stormcrown, the Dragonborn of the Fourth Era.
Using his mastery of magic, Moriden faced down the Mad Mage Ancano and prevented him from tapping power that would have ended the world.
Bah, master of magic indeed.
Through his cleverness, his strength of arms, and the power of his voice, he had captured the mighty Odahviing and forced it to reveal the location of dreaded Alduin.
Stepping through the veil, he entered the hallowed halls of Sovngarde itself and battled the World Eater, destroying the beast and saving all of Nirn for a second time.
Not that anyone noticed at the time. I sometimes wonder why I bothered.
Now, top off your ales and listen as I tell of his time among the mighty companions of Skyrim and his rise to power as their harbinger.
You have got to be kidding me. There is almost no chance that they know what happened among the companions, let alone all the time I spent gathering political power to myself. No, they have it all wrong. You, though, you seem almost desperate to hear the story. What is it you are looking for, I wonder? Well, since you want the story so bad and we seem to have time, why not order us a couple of drinks and I'll tell you the truth of that time. The truth, mind you. Not that drivel that bard up there is embarrassing themselves with. Because the truth... the truth is not what the bards would have you believe. "29 Morning Star, 4th Era, 202. After several fitful hours of sleep, I surrendered and took to the roads. The hour was still early, the sun not yet risen. Not that I could have seen it anyhow, not with the deluge that was drenching the area. The storm was almost enough to make me turn around and try for a few more hours' sleep. Instead, I left the city and rode through the rain and darkness, taking the mountain pass through Iverstead and then the roads to Riften itself. After turning north and using the back roads, I finally arrived at Bitterblade Hollow, the cave where the new and unwelcome predators had decided to call home. Honestly, I'm not sure why this location is of such a concern to Jarl Maven. It really is out in the middle of nowhere. The pest this time turned out to be wolves. Again, to the untrained, a potentially nasty opponent, but one that is of little moment to me. The only real upside was that there were a few ebony deposits here to make use of. I still have a few displays that require them, especially if I decide to make Daedric versions of the armor, which I'm told can be done. Not that anyone will admit to knowing how, which means I'll need to figure that out on my own as well. I dispatched the wolves, left, and started back for Whiterun. Hours more later, back in Whiterun, another conversation with Aella, another animal needed killing, this time in the Pale. If this is all the companions do, I have to wonder that people look to them at all. They didn't get involved in either the Civil War nor the Vampire Wars. They didn't even come looking for me to see about fighting a dragon, surely one of the most difficult beasts to kill of all time. Why, then, are they so respected? I'll give them credit for being hard to stare down for long, something about their eyes, I swear. But apart from that, I see nothing so far, apart from them being a glorified extermination service. Or maybe this is just what they give whelps to do. I've heard some of the others talking about the circle and what it takes to get in, but I don't see any of them doing much of anything except sitting around. What am I missing? Rather than leave the Pale tonight, I will spend some time in the yards, working on my blade skills. My arrows are more than enough usually, but perhaps this is more what the circle and the companions are looking for from me. 30 Morning Star, 4th Era, 202. A long session in the yards at Jorvaska has convinced me of two things. First, that I should have done that long ago to improve my sword work, and second, that I really should have a shield to work with as well. Although I've spent some time here previously, I was working with an axe back then, and though there are some similarities, they are also very, very different. Taking the time to work through the process, slowly and repeatedly, showed me a number of places where I should have long since improved. As to the shield, I think I've really known this for quite a while as well, but had put it off because I was primarily using my bow. Why need a shield if I was doing that right? On the other hand, I have encountered many a situation where having a shield would have been a good idea. I'm heading to the Pale, so once that's dealt with, I may as well head to Solitude and check in with Aryan and Madras. It's been a few days, after all, so maybe they've got some progress to report on their projects. How in oblivion does a troll get into someone's house, an upstairs home at that, and not only leave the entire door intact, but the rest of the house as well? It just doesn't make any sense. Yet that is exactly what I found when I arrived in Dawnstar. The home had been invaded by a troll. A very oblivious one who didn't notice my entry, and thankfully died from a single stab through where I figured its heart had to be. I've never gotten this close to one of the things, and I hope never to need to again. If it had noticed me, and with only my armor and my sword useful to me, I might have been in trouble. Serious trouble. No question, it is time to get a shield back on my arm. And I know the perfect one to grab from the museum. I'll need to make a replica for the display, but I will make the time for it. I sought out Aryan on my arrival at the museum and found him in the library. He had sent out some feelers among his contacts, which he still refuses to tell me anything about, and he's about certain that the fragment I have is, indeed, a piece of the Amulet of Kings. More interesting, he's being told that the other pieces are likely either in Skyrim already, or on their way. As best they can tell, the guardians of these pieces believe that reforging them together might be possible using a dove's fire breath, which means they are looking for the masters of dragon lore, and since the Blades haven't started advertising yet, that likely means the Greybeards. I'll need to go to High Hrothgar, both to find them and to warn them. The one who gave me my piece didn't know he was being hunted, and the others are likely in the same position. The question I need to answer, though, is this. Should I care? I have a single piece. If I do nothing, and those guardians are killed, then they will not seek me out. By doing so, I could gather all the pieces at once with a minimum of fuss to me. On the other hand, at least so far, the companions have not exactly been filling me with anything resembling a purpose. This may be a better route, though the amulet doesn't really mean anything to me either. After speaking with Aryan, I climbed the steps to the site of the Underdevelopment Planetarium. A great deal of work had already been put into the structure, mostly repairs and foundation work. I spent several hours working with Madras, using directions he provided, and spent quite some time working on it as well. I'm still unsure how it's all going to come together, but after those hours spent pounding Dwemer ingots into plates and attaching them to stone walls, I was too tired to really care either. Tomorrow I will procure Spellbreaker, make a replica for the display, and then possibly work more in here before deciding where to go. I need to report the completion of the troll removal in Dawnstar, but there is the whole amulet thing now as well. 31 Morningstar, 4th Era, 202. I took care of making a replica of Spellbreaker and getting it on display, exchanging it for the real one. I then made a mistake. I went back into the planetarium. It was one of those moments where before you realize it, you have lost yourself in the work. I have never been much into physical labor, but for whatever reason, this project has sucked me in completely. Plates went on walls, pipes were constructed and mounted, and far more besides. Still, it is not done, but it is as far constructed as I can manage at the moment. I regret all of the cogs, mountings, gyros, and other Dwemer material I have melted down over the months. They would have been most handy. The day is over, though, all of its hours sunk into this work. Another quick rest, and I will set out for Whiterun. I wouldn't have the companions think I've been killed by a mere troll. 1 Sun's Dawn, 4th Era, 202. The only thing worse than fighting in a thunderstorm is doing so with a trio of cultists who think you have plans to destroy whatever it is they are worshipping. I have dealt with these before, but this time the fight dragged on for substantially longer than they have before, and as a result I have learned a few things about them and their cult that I hadn't before. It all stems from my status as Dragonborn. Dovahkiin. It was mostly incomprehensible, but they repeatedly shouted things about how the true Dragonborn would soon awaken, that my pretending needed to come to an end, and something about a person called Mirak. I can only make some guesses, but this true Dragonborn is the Mirak that is mentioned, I think. And in their beliefs, it would seem there is only room for one Dragonborn. If they keep up this foolishness, then I suppose I'll have to go and deal with that whole situation. Previous groups of notes indicating a base of operations on Solstheim. Not a place I wish to go, and not a place I have any reason to go just yet. Aella had nothing more for me, but Farkas did. While it is something of the same kind of job, it's not an animal, it's more a real beast that I can see being problematic. Spriggans in the Rift are being a pain, and so they have sent for us. In a way, this works well for me. I can head for Hrothgar and follow up on this whole Amulet of Kings situation, then move on to the Dwemer Ruin that the Argonian female in Riften urged me to go to, allowing me to get rid of both the lexicon she'd shoved in my hands and get more materials for the planetarium, before heading for the grove where these Spriggans are at and finishing the whole thing off. At least it's more or less straightforward. The camp I saw at High Hrothgar, beside the main entryway, drew my immediate attention. It only had a lone occupant, an older man, calling himself Argus. It took some time and convincing to get him to open up, but he is one of the guardians of Akatosh I was looking for, and I have a better feel for what is happening here. He knows the Tong is hunting him, hired by a collective of Daedric worshippers from Morrowind. The Guardians believe that when the amulet is reforged, it would forever seal away all of oblivion from Mundus. I think that's wishful thinking. But on the off chance it's true, the Tong has been hired to keep it from happening. I don't have a feel for numbers, but they have at least one dead. Byron, the one who gave me his fragment. Argus, and another called Ezra, who should have already reached Hrothgar by now. I've been asked to look for her somewhere in Pale Pass. Argus also decided to entrust me with his part of the amulet, which is both flattering and painting a giant target on my back at the same time. The pass will be something to look into, but I have other things first, like getting more supplies for the planetarium. That meant riding for Avanshansel. On entry, though, I almost felt I already knew the dance here. Ghosts of the past were conversing as I entered. The lexicon that was now in my pack they had in their hands, and they spoke of pushing into the ruins to make use of it. Given that I know only the Argonian will survive, it only remains to see how it all plays out. Very familiar. I almost expect to see Savos in their midst. Avanshansel is one of the deeper ruins I have explored. It's not quite up to the depth of the bigger ones, or at least I'm assuming so since I haven't found an entry into Blackreach yet, but it's still certainly possible that there might be a connection eventually. The entire descent, I have caught flashes of the ghosts I saw near the entrance, encouraging each other to keep going, giving descriptions of the site's significance and so forth. The part that is most disturbing is that, for them, the machines here hadn't been awake. That clearly changed at some point, as I have been downing them in fair numbers since I arrived. Could this be what frightened that Argonian so much that she refused to come back? A smooth entry, the activation of the machines, and then a terrified race for the exit? It would at least be believable, though how returning the lexicon to its original location is going to help her, I have no idea. This is far more dangerous of a place than I had expected, or rather, it has the potential to be. When I first saw the centurions laid out on the stone tables, I half expected that one, or even both, would rise up to do battle, which I would have been hard to deal with, certainly. I'm just as glad not to have to discover how bad it might have been, but this scene does tell me something. I had in the past always wondered where these machines were made. I now have that answer. Given how important that is to the Dwemer way of life, or at least what we know of it, I can't help but think this place is heavily protected. What I've seen so far bears that out, but so far, I've seen none of the massive centurions or their derivatives. The Argonian back in Riften might have had the right of it. I was cautious before. Now I think would be a good time to notch that up to paranoid for the remainder of my time here. The Argonians' party realized that they were in trouble, though it took the deaths of 2 of them for it to be clear. The first lost his nerve, turned, and ran straight into a pair of Dwemer machines. The second set off a spinning blade trap. The remainder, though, continued on, and tried to take a pair of centurions on their own. To their credit, they did get one of them. Only one, however. 2 Suns Dawn, 4th Era, 202. I plugged the lexicon back into its pedestal and departed the ruin. I got several of the pieces I'll need for the planetarium, got rid of a useless bit of Dwemer technology, and now I'm out in the rain. At least the exploration was more or less uncomplicated, though lengthier than I had hoped. I'll have to make a point of avoiding Argonians in Riften for a while. They seem a little needy. A few hours of rest, though, would not go amiss. I still have the job for the companions to take care of at Ambershade Clearing. After 4 hours of sleep, I'm feeling much more alive than when I left Avanshansel earlier. A small walk to work out the kinks, and I was back on the road, heading for the area north of Lake Honric. I found the clearing in question, locating my targets without much difficulty. Spriggans do have a tendency to stand out. Between the green glowing skin, or bark, or whatever it is, and the bears and wolves they tend to have along, it is not hard to locate them. 4 arrows took care of the problem for the rift, which means it's time to head back to Jorvaska and pick up what I suspect will be another meaningless job. If this keeps up, perhaps I will leave the companions and concentrate on the museum full-time. I reported the death of the Spriggans to Farkas, and he steered me to Skjor. And his job is something a little more than just killing animals. The Jarl of Whiterun has a problem on his hands, though the steward seems to be keeping it from him for the moment. Indeed, my instructions are not to bother Balgruuf with this at all. They've had a prisoner escape, one that is bad news for the locals in the area. Rather than trying to capture him, which the steward believes to now be a waste of time, I'm being sent to hunt him down and kill him. Not perhaps what I had thought the companions would be used for, but at least it's not another animal hunt. I didn't have much to go on other than a brief description of the fugitive. Orzamer male, originally captured in the areas around Rorikstead. Figuring that human animals are at least somewhat like real animals, I made a guess that he would return to his lair, meaning a ride out to the westernmost city in the hold. I could tell I was right when I got close enough to the city. The screams were a pretty good indicator. Oblivion, if I'd been a few moments later, I think that the criminal would have been killed by Gleda the goat. Don't laugh, I know that goat better than I want to. And she is no lightweight. Fortunately, it didn't come to that, and I dispatched the Orzamer easily from horseback. At least he made it easy on me. On the other hand, it's still early enough that there's more than enough time to ride back to Whiterun and report in, meaning that the day is not yet over. I returned, made my report to Skjor, and was immediately handed yet another mission, this time to deal with some giant who had, somehow, through means that were never made clear and that I am honestly afraid to ask about too much, run off with someone's family heirloom. A maul. How do you have a family maul? I get a sword. They're relatively light, easy to transport and so forth, but a family maul? You'd better hope your family members are all brawny or it's never moving from where you put it down last. Unless a giant happens by, I suppose. I'll deal with it tomorrow. I've run back and forth across Whiterun all day, and I'm simply too tired to even consider doing so again today. 3 Suns Dawn, 4th Era, 202. Sleeping only made me more angry, I think. The companions are supposed to be elite warriors, a group that people with my kind of experience are supposed to be able to go to and get respect. Yes, fine, I've only been with them a week, but they've given me nothing more than what feels like busy work. I'm not some up-and-coming no-name anymore. I haven't been for some time. Where is the respect? Not in the ones I've spoken to so far, for certain. I left Whiterun to deal with the family maul issue, riding north to the beginnings of the snow-covered regions. I trekked through the hills to the giant camp, and within an hour of arrival, I had turned the camp into a former giant camp. Maybe a hunter will move in here, maybe not. I can't say I care now. Rather than go back to Whiterun, though, I'm heading for Pale Pass Cave. If the companions want to waste my time and talents, fine. The Guardians have given me something to do that might actually be useful. After more consideration, I decided not to head straight for the cave. Several of the explorer's tools that I have been finding are supposed to be along the southern mountain range regions, several of them in Falkreath Hold. Rather than continue doing menial work for the companions, I decided to follow up on those clues instead, starting with another of Sanamia's journals. This one was purported to be located in Arkwind Basin, so it was there I went first. I found the basin easily enough, along with a rather large and experienced dove. I'm not sure it had been waiting for me specifically, but it wasted no time in challenging me. I called down the storms, the lightning, and the rain, and then I hit it with Dragon Rend. Pinned to the ground, lightning hitting it repeatedly, the beast did not last long. The journal was lying in a barrow nearby, and directed me to a hidden chamber at Lake Ilinalta. I may have to look into that, since I'm doing this kind of work in the area at the moment anyhow. The next piece to seek was a key of some kind, located in Greywater Grotto. I hadn't expected to meet anyone there, in a cave on the north side of a wrecked Helgen, but as I reached the end of the cave, I found a woman calling herself Fiotra. The song she sang was haunting, but her words even more so. She is a former companion, one who claims she was almost made a member of the Circle. They wanted something from her, something she wasn't willing to give up, though she didn't say what. Only that her humanity was more important to her than what they offered, and that she was suspicious of easy power. This feels very relevant to me for some reason. There is information here that I am missing somehow. I was vaguely disturbed by her tale, though she never mentioned why she refused the Circle. It is a thing to keep in mind, but for now, not something I can act on. Instead, I grabbed the 60 or so keys in an open chest nearby, hoping that one of them is the key that I was searching for. It's time to move on. 4 Sun's Dawn, 4th Era, 202. I made my way to Lakeside and remained there the night, sparing me the need to go into Falkreath and perhaps get involved with the man I know is waiting there to speak with me. The title of Thane and the land it granted begins to pay off. I left the house and made my way to the only place I could think of that met the description for the next and final item on my list for the moment. A pack, described as being bottomless. It is said to be at the peak of the mountain that dominates Falkreath, where the winds constantly call. Sounds like a good match for Shriekwind Bastion. At least I'm hoping so. I would hate to waste my time clearing out a Nordic tomb otherwise. After clearing out the skeletons and, more importantly, their vampire masters, I eventually made my way to the top of the bastion. The bag wasn't there. It was, however, on a nearby peak that required me to do a little bit of rock climbing, which did not do much for my fear of heights, I will admit. The bag itself, though, is remarkably roomy, far more so than the one I had been using since I had the skill to make one. Enough so that it wasn't even a question of if I would use it, it was more a question of how could it possibly hold so much, and with additional space to spare somehow. I've rummaged around in it, and though I knew it was empty, my hand seemed to vanish into the depths of its interior and still locate things. There is magic here, and if magic, then power. This will not be getting far from my possession, I think. From Shriekwind, I made my way to Lake Ilinalta to search for the location mentioned in Sanamia's journal. It took some hours of searching the shorelines for the right markers, but I eventually found what I believed to be the site she referred to. As expected, it was under the surface, requiring me to spend a good amount of time slaughtering slaughterfish and pulling rocks and mud out of the way. By the time I was done, full dark had fallen. Rather than enter the newly uncovered doorway, I made camp on the shores and waited for morning.